Okay, so I want to give you something which is going to sound like the opposite message of what we spoke about yesterday, but it's actually complementary, and I think it's the same message. Yesterday, I told you about not being afraid, the mitzvah. We studied the mitzvah of al yerach levavchem, the mitzvah of a warrior to not be afraid, and I explained how success in war depends on not being afraid, and we should do this mitzvah b'simcha. The reason why, to recap in short, the reason why success in war depends on not being afraid, and the reason why one shouldn't be afraid is because the battle that we wage is always the battle against evil that presents itself to us. We are not looking to eradicate all of evil in one fell swoop. We accept that there's some evil in the world. Our mission is to battle whatever whatever evil we can, and our success against that evil depends on our confidence and no more. That was the discussion yesterday. Now I want to talk about something that can sometimes follow from that. People might think it's the conclusion of that, but it's in fact the opposite, to make this incorrect conclusion. And that is, some people think that, okay, Hashem is in control. Basically, you're saying that Hashem is in control and I'm going to be happy because I trust Hashem. And what I want to tell you right now is that Hashem is not in control. That is a terrible idea. Not only is that a terrible idea, but I think it's the equivalent. To say Hashem is in control is the equivalent of being afraid. So let's imagine this person. Someone thinks to himself, look, I'm not afraid. I trust Hashem. Hashem is running the world. Now, first of all, let me tell you why that's not true. Because God doesn't control what we can control. Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz mi'ir shamayim. Everything is in the hand of heaven besides for the fear of heaven. So in the battle against evil, God steps back and creates man in his image, as we read in last week's parsha, and man has to discover what is good and what is evil, and to wage that war, as we also learned in last week's parsha, in the story of eating from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. So the knowledge of good and evil and the battle between good and evil is waged in the terrain, in the domain of man, by man who is in the image of God. And to punt to God and to say, well, it's not me, it's him, is a terrible error. And it's the root of all sin, because all good deeds come from the idea that we have to face evil when we see it, and we have to do what we can. So when we spoke yesterday, and this is the corollary, I spoke about the idea that what's not in our control is not what we're battling. At the same time, it's very important for a person to realize that you shouldn't think to yourself, well, you know what? Okay, so things are not in my control and let me give up. You alone have to seek what is in your control. You have to study what possibly can you do. You shouldn't give up and say, well, whatever I can't do, and that's okay. It's true. But you better know for certain what you can and what you can't do, and you better turn over every stone to discover what you might be able to change, and you better turn over every idea to think, well, is there possibly anything I can do? And to say, oh, you know what? It's not our job to finish, and therefore I'm not going to overexert myself into figuring out what I can do. That would be a terrible error. And not only that, I want to tell you that happiness doesn't come from realizing Hashem is in control. That's just another way of being afraid. Why? Because what's the idea of being afraid? And we spoke about this, that person's afraid because they feel like their success, their personal actualizing their self, their happiness, their own being, their own tranquility, their own fulfillment is dependent on certain circumstances, and therefore they're afraid. And we discussed yesterday is that no, in fact, your own fulfillment and your own success depends on nothing but for yourself, because you have to wage the battle, and that success is a battle waged properly. So if a person thinks to himself, okay, I'm going to be happy because Hashem is in control, what he's really saying is that despite the fact that I cannot actualize myself, despite the fact that I can't do my mission in this world, I still accept passively that I'm okay with the fact that everything is messed up, because somehow or another, beyond my realm in a way that I can't fathom, somehow or another, things are fine. And that is a terrible idea, because then deep down you are a rach levav. You're a pathetic, soft-hearted person, because you're not taking ownership. You're not taking agency for your little corner of this world. And that's an equal error, and perhaps even a more pernicious error than actually being afraid. So see, someone who's actually afraid is because he's bothered by the fact that there might be a terrible outcome. And then you have another extreme where someone says, I'm not bothered by anything. I'm not bothered by anything because I quote unquote trust Hashem. And that's a terrible, terrible error, because what that really means is that you don't think that you determine anything. And you don't think that your own success is something that you participate in, but it's rather something that's just given to you from on high in a way that's beyond your comprehension. And that is equivalent to being soft-hearted, because it means you're not taking control. It's equivalent to being afraid. And famously, the Gemara says, "Hakoil b'dei shamayim chutz miyashamayim." Everything is in the hands of Hashem, except for the fear of Hashem. And I want to suggest that this fear of Hashem is the same thing we were talking about. The Yoreh and the Rach Levov is someone who's afraid of the wrong thing. Someone who's afraid of the wrong thing. He's afraid of the wrong outcome. And really, we only have one thing to be afraid of. The only thing we should be afraid of, the only thing we should concern ourselves with is Shamayim, is our relationship with heaven. Meaning to say, are we in the service of heaven or not? And in that question, we better be very afraid. And we better not punt to God and say, He's in control. We better always think to ourselves, are we doing every single thing we can? Are we doing the most we can to fight evil? Are we racking our brains to think about, is there anything we can do? Is there anything that we missed, any opportunity that we missed to engage in this war against evil? Or are we perhaps missing something? So we have to be very careful and navigate carefully these two extremes. On the one hand, a person should not overthink possible outcomes and live in fear. On the other hand, one should never respond to his fear by saying, well, Hashem is in control and everything's fine. Everything is not fine. Everything is only fine if you make it fine. So what a person has to do is he has to, but in that area, as I keep on reiterating, that area where you can make it fine is the area that you have control. And that's what you have to worry about. That's what you have to really worry about and fear heaven, not be the fearful person, the Yoreh Rach Levov. Don't be soft-hearted. I'd rather be a strong heart. The strong heart is the one who fears heaven. And the reason why the strong-hearted person is the one who fears heaven is because that is what it is in our control. And you should be very afraid of that which is in your control, and of whether you're going to actually affect it, put it into practice or not. So this is the balance that we have to navigate. On the one hand, don't concern yourself with what you cannot affect, what you cannot change. On the other hand, that which you can change is your concern and no one else's concern. God puts it to your hands. And you always have to think to yourself, is there something I can do? Is there any way I can do better? And we all have to think that way. And collectively, through all of us thinking about how we individually can improve things, how we individually can engage in the battle, collectively putting that all together, we will have a tremendous, tremendous nitzchachon, reminding everyone to do all their mitzvahs of nechama, besimcha, gedola, so that we keep the morale, keep the courage of Am Yisrael.